Hello and welcome to another episode of your favorite D&D themed podcast, Mastering Dungeons. I'm Shawn Merwin, here with the post-Thanksgiving well-fed Teos Abadia. Have you recovered, Teos? Have you recovered from the feast?
I have not recovered from the feast. I have not recovered from my duty of eating leftovers. It's hard to like go back to
Mhm.
normal when everybody's like finished that, and you're like, oh, okay. So that's my problem.
Yeah.
How did you fare with the fare?
We generally it was just my wife and my daughter and I, so we kept it kind of on the lowdown. Not too many leftovers, kept it reasonable. What we do get now, though, is our post Thanksgiving snowstorm, which
Oh,
seems to be hitting right now. So by the
wow.
time when we start the podcast, there's probably an inch of snow on the ground. If it continues at this rate, by the time we finish, there may be a foot of snow on the ground, depending on what the lake decides to do to us.
Yeah. Well, it is positively balmy here in comparison. I mean, it's cold, but it's not. We're nowhere near that. So happy snow day, I guess. The thing that, speaking of snow days, my son is going back to school right now as we speak. He's going out the door. And this is notable because the teachers have been on strike for, I think it's officially 11 days, but they had 2 days they were already not there. And my son had been sick and out of school for a couple days before that. So it's been like 4 weeks since my son has been in school with the holidays and everything in there. And so
Wow.
he is going through a system shock roll right now as he tries to figure out, what this is like.
Well, I hope he survives that system shock roll. I'm sure it's you get in this rhythm of not having to go to school then to have to go back is I feel that. I feel
Yeah.
that.
Blunt trauma.
And another thing I feel is thankful that I get to do a podcast with you. And hopefully our listeners are also thankful and they show their appreciation sometimes by sending in questions or comments. So let's get to a couple of those today in our listener corner. The first is Andrew Bashinsky coming to us via Twitter. He says, over the recent years, in so much as one can generalize, the fifth edition audience has become more invested in their characters and less comfortable with death. Should this change how we approach designing the sorts of adventures where, quote, death is not the end and cool stuff happens when you die?
Mm.
Such adventures tend to place the character into more deadly situations to trigger the death payoff. But from a player perspective, since you don't know that death is not the end, it is still a potentially jarring and emotionally difficult experience as you're essentially unfairly losing your character. The bleed, subject of recent chatter, still happens. Thoughts.
Mm.
So there is the immediate response to this actually came from someone on Twitter, Jennifer Kretschmer at DreamWist, one of the pillars of
Mhm.
goodness and light in our D&D community. And she posted the answer. A conversation during session 0 should always be about character death and how it's handled in the campaign and the world, and to get the players' comfort levels with it. That's a great place to make a point of there are things to be explored in this campaign beyond death. It is not the end for the characters,
Mm.
and yeah, that's a great bit of advice. Obviously, let everyone know what the plans are for character death. How frequent will it be, and will there be something cool that happens when it happens, so then you can be ready for it to happen. But Andrew's original question also went into adventure design and sort of player facing stuff. So it goes a little bit more in depth into how we're going to look at it here.
Mhm.
So the first thing I want to say is that character death does not equal characters falling unconscious. This may
Yeah.
seem wild to people, but in my travels to conventions over the years, I've had people, players, and DMs use the word death to refer to them being reduced to 0 hit points. As in, oh yeah, I was just at a game and 5 characters died. And I'm like, wow, 5 characters died. And well, how'd they die? Well, they got hit by an orc and then and they fell. I was like, well, did they fail their death saves? Was it massive damage? What do you mean? I'm like, well, you said they died. Well, they died, but they came back. I'm like, no, that's not character death. That's falling unconscious. So this question is actually talking about characters no longer being alive. Just wanted to make sure we're on the same page there. The next thing I want to do to Andrew's question, reject the idea that players are any more or less, quote, invested in their characters than any previous edition. You know, if you go back to the Satanic Panic days of first edition and OD&D and basic set and so on, is the people, the Satanic Panickers, feared that players would get so invested into their characters that if their characters died, the players would suffer mental trauma, you know, anything from depression to actual suicidal thoughts. So that shows at least the implication of how invested players were in their characters in those early days. I don't think the addition or even the zeitgeist over the years has said what characters or how players relate to character death. I think it's just the person and sort of the campaign. You know, some people get super invested. Some people could care less. That was just as true way back when as it is now. Teos, you look like you may have something to say on that.
I do. Like I hear what you're saying, and then it is true. Like I remember, I have a folder of all my dead characters, right? And it's all from the AD&D up to second edition era, and it's enormous, right? It's a big, thick 3-ring binder, and yet I remember many of those deaths being super sad and significant. And I was for sure attached to them, but also those characters were less robust and interesting than they are today. And I knew less about sort of becoming invested in the character. So I'd say I'm way more invested in my characters these days. My characters are better, more fleshed out. I want more for them than I did back then. Back then it was more like, I just really like playing this half-orc. You know, he's really cool. And I was going to get this dungeon magazine or Dragon magazine herbalist thing that my DM had approved, and then this spider just bites me and I'm dead, and this totally is terrible. And you know, so it was a big deal, but I think that nobody was creating connections around our characters the way that people often do today in RPGs. So yes, like you were always attached to your characters, or a lot of us were, but I still feel like it has changed, and the game itself wants to not tell a story of dungeon exploration and looting and dying at the hands of a single spider bite. It wants to tell a story of sort of like big epic deaths and meaningful deaths and critical role type stuff, right? Like, I mean, that's the extreme of it, but you want like that to be like a moment that you would, in the cartoon rendition of your campaign, would look really good, right? Like that's what you're kind of hoping for.
Okay. Fair enough.
You're like, no.
So then let's talk about this question. No, I can see a time investment. I can see more of a time investment in the creation of the character, in the building of the character. I don't see any more or any less investment into the story of the characters, because the same sorts of stories have been told over. Yes, you are correct in the sense that the types of stories that were told in the earliest days tended to be, you go into a dungeon, you do go through the dungeon, you succeed, you fail, whatever happens, and then you're done. Yes, you can maybe buy items. Yes, you can do this, but there was less of a story outside the dungeon, more of a story inside the dungeon. That I can see. I still can point to people that were super invested, not time-wise, not just, you know, the amount of energy they put into it, but the actual caring about their character and the story. I see it equally now as I saw it then.
I feel like 3E was when I saw, you know, that was when I sat down at tables with random people and they had real thoughts around their character and real goals. Not everybody, but a lot of people did. And that's to me when I started thinking of like, okay, you know, people are and I would learn from the other people at the table about the cleverness that they had brought to the character that they'd fashioned versus before that it was minor, right? It was and like at least and maybe it was the groups that I played with, right? They would have, even though I tried to run pretty meaningful campaigns, they would have character names that were, insulting someone else at the table or something. And it was that kind of like just
Mhm.
and they just wanted to run around and kick stuff and slay stuff. And that was a lot of what I
Yeah.
saw. And even though they
Yeah.
liked their
Well,
character, yeah,
yeah. And I played with players who would make whole newsletters about the campaigns
mm,
and their characters and write stories
yeah,
and get super invested
hmm,
and draw pictures and do the whole thing. And when you started seeing this investment was when you got into organized play
yeah.
and started playing with people in a shared world setting. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we can't qualify or quantify it.
It's
We can
hard.
only bring
Yeah.
our own experiences.
I mean, one thing for
Yeah.
sure is that maybe we agree on this. The games seem designed now around protecting your character. Do we agree on that? Like, is 5e trying to essentially make it so dying, like TPK is really hard in 5th edition, right? I mean, do we agree on
Oh
that?
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's no doubt that having substantial and long-lasting character death is much harder in fifth
Mhm.
edition than it has been uh, in especially AD&D and second edition uh, times
Yeah.
for sure.
And so I think that, like,
But yeah,
I think a good question is, should we be designing for that, right? Which is, I think, some of what Andrew here is asking. Like, and maybe he's
mhm,
saying, like, if the idea is that dying is less prevalent, maybe because you're trying to get to this end point of preserving the character and having them have some grandiose story or a better chance at it. If that's kind of going on, then should the adventures have something to them that makes death, should there either be no death, or should the death be like a special thing like we see in Planescape, I'm avoiding spoilers, but there's an angle
mhm,
there with death. Should it be,
yeah,
should that be kind of what we're injecting the things? And should you have things like, oh, you died, then you become this special version that is the post-dead version? What do you think?
yeah. I don't think you need to in general, I don't think you need to have that sort of thing in your game. I don't think the
Mm,
game needs to be created to take that into account because the game is already created to take that into account. Right? There's Revivify, there's Raise Dead, there's Resurrection, there's Wish, there's True Resurrection. There's however many dozens of ways the game has already, in addition to it just being in general harder to have character death at the table because of death saves and healing and all of that. So, do you need to? No. Andrew's question is if you do have something that cool happens when the character
mhm.
dies, are you then more likely to try to get characters to die? And therefore, do you need to have some sort of guardrails in place so when the characters do die, the players don't instantly get angry or sad or whatever before they even get to the cool thing? And Jennifer's answer first, just say ahead of time,
Right.
hey, your character may die here. Don't fret, don't panic. It's going to be part of the story. If you don't want to do that, or if you want it to be sort of a surprise, then you do though need to give hints. You need to say you've heard a rumor that this person you knew died and then you saw them the next day. You don't know what
Mhm.
happened, but it's weird, or you hear stories about this, or you can get more specific depending on the feature, the trick that you're putting into
Right.
your game, just to prime the pump, if you will, so people understand that when they die, their character dies, they don't have to do anything about it because the story is going to take them places.
Yeah, I tend to think that death is still important to the game, And by that I mean that it's important for players to periodically have either a serious brush with it or just plain outright death. And when I wrote an organized play adventure that was kind of criticized because it has an encounter where death is fairly possible. There's a creature that at your level can just one shot some characters, and it's a chance that that'll happen. I said I'm okay with that. The game needs to sometimes just take you out. It sucks when it happens to you, but I feel like you have to see that sometimes, or we just take everything for granted. And I feel that as painful as my various character deaths were, they did make victory really sweet, and they did make me care about the game and its lethality, and then the challenge of it was more tangible, more real, more everything, because I saw my characters die, right? And my friends' characters die. And so that was important. And so I do think the game needs to have some of that. And it is what it is. It's like losing at a board game. We move on, we play again, right? Like sometimes that will happen. And I think those are poignant scenes, even if it's rare, like it is in 5th edition, when characters die in a 5th edition campaign. I think that's memorable for everybody. And there should be that going on in the game. If we always do the, you died, but you came back in ghost form, well, then it's almost like it's a part of your character rather than being what it should be, what it is in real life, right? It's scary.
Okay. So, Andrew, thank you for that question. And our next question comes from Monster Fight 5e via Mastodon. Hey, Shawn, are you going to talk about the design process of making this adventure, Peril in Pinebrook, on Mastering Dungeons? So I wasn't going to. We mentioned it last week. I wasn't going to really get into the design, but I have gotten so many questions on this that I probably should just bring it up and answer some of the questions. So I will do so. Now, because of NDAs, I am not going to talk about anything specific in the WotC process side of things. I can say that it's great to work with all the folks at Wizards of the Coast who contributed to this work, contributed ideas, contributed editing, art, direction, all of it. Wonderful folks. And it really is a testament to their professionalism and their love for the game that they take time to do a project like this. If you don't know what project I'm talking about, Peril in Pinebrook is a free adventure that you can get from the Wizards of the Coast website. It is part of the educator resource project that they do that includes curriculum packets for teachers, free resources for teachers who are using D&D either in the classroom or for club activities. So this adventure is something that they can run. It was written to be run, and I have to make this clear. It's written to be run by people who have never played or seen D&D. So this is I know people want to play D&D. Maybe I should try to run it. I don't have the rules. I don't have rule books. Heck, I don't even have dice. What do I do? So they can pick this up, and it's meant to be digestible and runnable by someone who's never played D&D, quite possibly a middle school or even younger DM, and someone who had no time to prepare the adventure beforehand. So it's pick it up, read the box text, walk through everything step by step by step.
And can I ask,
it's a manual more than it is typical game material. Yeah.
Can I ask, was that sort of the vision from the beginning? Like, we're doing this as part of this educator resource page, or did it kind of become that?
Nope, that's what it was from the start.
Which is awesome. That's a great goal.
So,
and I'm glad to hear that D&D was thinking about that, right? Because that is a great thing to be thinking about. Like, how can just anybody pick up and go? And especially in the school context where you want people to get going so that you can run a club. And so the idea that you could just not be intimidated, go to it is awesome. And so then with this directive, I mean, you must have had, that's an enormous thing to try to do. How did you approach that?
I approached it by using my years of experience in teaching new players how to play the game and thinking of or seeing other people teach the game and think everything I did wrong. Everything I did that was too much, or sometimes too little, but usually too much for someone to understand or someone to absorb or someone to take in, in a very brief amount of time that we have to teach it. And this whole experience was meant to run in like 90 minutes. Because if you're at an after school club, you may only have a half hour or an hour. If you're lucky, 2 hours. The local gaming club at the high school here, they don't have enough time to run role-playing games at their normal meetings. They only have time for like quick board games because of school restrictions. So, but once a month, they can do a longer thing. And that's when they run their role-playing game sessions. So as I'm doing all of this, I'm thinking, what can I pull out of the game while having it still be D&D, still following the rules, but just removing some things? And with the understanding that this is not for D&D players. This is not for experienced dungeon masters. This is for that audience. That's why we're probably not going to see it on D&D Beyond. That's why it is a PDF coming from the educator resource page, not something that you go and purchase or look at on D&D Beyond. So I took care to make sure that the rules weren't changed. There's no saving throws. We don't talk about ability scores. There's no big, extensive list of skills. It's just, what do you need at its most basic level to run a fun game of D&D and get across the flow of the game without having to sit for 90 minutes and explaining things? So the first thing I took out were ability scores, because what's the first thing that you feel like you have to do sometimes when they're looking at a character sheet? What does strength mean? What does dexterity mean? What does intelligence, charisma, constitution? What does that all mean? And we say it both in terms of what it means for just a definition and then what it means in the game. And I've seen people take an hour just to do that. Can't do that here. So we want to get this, get it going. And so that's what I did. There was also no time to get into these deep philosophical debates about like what's good and evil or what does fun mean. I was putting tips for the dungeon masters and then tips for players in it. And so for the first tip I put for dungeon masters is have fun. If everyone agrees that changing rules or changing the story means that a game will be more fun, then change it. Now, other times, rule 0, as it's been described, is the dungeon master is always right. And that's not the tone that we want to set here. For perhaps a very young, inexperienced first-time dungeon master, we don't want to say you're always right. We want to say have fun. You have fun, and make sure everybody else has fun. And we don't want to get into, well, the game's always not going to be fun. That's not how, when you come to introduce someone to a new hobby, you don't want to get into this, well, sometimes the game's just not fun. Not what you want to say. You want to get into a philosophical discussion in a Dungeon Master's Guide? Rock on. Not here. So that's where that sort of thing came from. And then it was just tell a story. To get players making decisions and rolling dice and smiling and laughing and making decisions that may or may not have a large impact on the story, but at least making decisions. And so that was the whole design process. It's if you read the adventure, it's quite simple. It's quite straightforward, definitely linear. Tried to throw in a couple of cool things that would make the players go, ooh, that's weird, or oh, cool. Try to throw in a couple of things where the DM might be able to use their creative and storytelling chops in a controlled manner. And that's pretty much how the design went. I am impressed with the amount of feedback I got during design and the number of iterations that this went through to get it to the state that it's in. If this little PDF went through this much review, I can't even begin to fathom how much a big hardcover release goes through. Let's put it
Wow.
that way.
Okay.
So that's good. So in general, it's just let's introduce people to the concept of telling a story, asking what their characters do, giving an answer, rolling dice when necessary, and getting to the next part of the story.
That's cool. I mean, looking at the PDF here, which everybody can get for free, as you mentioned, it's cool to note, like, you've got this awesome cover, then you've got really a page that sort of sets the tone, and a page on rules. That's it. And then it's a page on running the adventure, some tips for running the adventure. And then we're into the introduction. The introduction's a page. Starting the adventure is a page. It's all really concise. It reminds me almost, I don't know if you did this deliberately, but of D&D encounters. Like, encounter 2 is on 2 pages, right? That could be facing each other. Encounter 3, I think, is the same. Like, it's sort of this 2-page spread, which makes it very self-contained, very easy to run. You also, a really nice thing is the estimated playtime for each encounter. That's super helpful for people planning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and some nice things.
My original, my original hope was to get it all down to 1 page. For every page would be its own thing. Tell this to the players. Hey, DM, this is what you need to know. Here's encounter 1 page. Some of them needed to run a little bit longer to get all the instruction that was needed to show how to teach the game. But for the most part, it was that. Let's keep everything on the 2 pages. It was also preferred to refer to the Practically Complete Guide to Dragons, which Wizard had released a few months back. So it uses that chart of draconic words and their translation into common, so we could do some fun things with that. Do a little puzzle where the players would have to look up words in the glossary and then translate. So that sort of thing. The thing that we find fun as players, pared down and put into a form that could be easily explained and used by new dungeon masters.
I like that you have a sort of glossary page reference sheet at the end, and then there is a tips for players. There's just a like 3 quick, like, be a good teammate, think about your character's actions, be supportive. That's nice. I can't help but notice no link to the basic rules that I can find. It links to, or it suggests that you go to dnd.wizards.com to get the Practical Guide to Dragons, which I'd be surprised whether you can easily get from that website to that, but at least it tries to send you somewhere. 4 pre-gens, which is interesting, and they seem to be slightly different from ones that I've seen before.
These are, I created them specifically for this. I wasn't using any previous template. We wanted to give the players the basics. So rather than having all this information, is what is something you're likely to do, we'll have a line for that. You're likely to attack. So here's a melee weapon. Here's a ranged weapon. Oh, you're a spellcaster. Under attacks, we will have the spell that you can cast. And then we decided to give 1 special ability for each character that sort of mimics something that their class would do if they were running a full character. So the rogue gets it's not a sneak attack, but the first attack they do during an encounter, they can do extra damage. A fighter can use a second wind sort of thing. The cleric can heal.
Nice.
And the wizard can cast magic missile.
And you avoid the problem of, hey, I have this list of spells. Go find somewhere on the internet where these are actually referred to. I also love here, each of them has a description block, and you have a checkbox. Choose one or the other for each line. So, like, for the cleric, I'm graceful or I'm clumsy. Choose one or the other. I'm silly or I'm serious. I'm polished armor or tarnished armor. Peaceful or warlike. That's really cool. Where'd you come up with that? Was there some inspiration for that?
Well, the inspiration for it was dual. The first is, having taught D&D for so many years at so many different locations, coming up with descriptions is hard for players. They don't really have a frame of reference. So this gives them the chance to create their character, but it limits the choices, right? It puts it in that box that they can then, oh, okay, this is what you mean when you say, what's your character like? What do they look like? What do they
Yeah.
sound like? What's their personality? A game that does this really well is Dungeon World or the Apocalypse World games. You can make a checklist of the different things that your character might do or wear. Sometimes it's highly mechanical, sometimes it's just cosmetic. So that was a good template to do this through. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so I've heard a few people have run it. Most of the people who've run it are more experienced, but they say that it's working well. So I'm still waiting to see if it goes to schools, and people are trying to run it who have no experience, how that plays out. We did play test it with a couple groups that were in that situation, and I got some good feedback from them. Took a few more things out, polished a few things here and there. So we'll see how it goes.
Did you go to the mall during Thanksgiving? I need someone to play test this game.
I absolutely did not do that. I am not that outgoing in any way, shape, or form.
Well, congratulations. This is an awesome project. It looks great. I mean, I can't think of, if someone were to say to me, hey, we need somebody for this kind of a project, I'd be like, well, you want Shawn Merwin. So I'm glad they worked with you. It's also interesting to me, someone was saying to me, wait, I thought Wizards of the Coast wasn't using freelancers. And I said, yeah.
Yeah, I know they're using at least one.
Yeah. And two, because Scott Fitzgerald Gray worked on the editing. So
yeah, Scott worked as an editor. So yeah, but everybody down the line really invested their time and energy and thought to get this right. So hopefully it resonates with folks and it pulls some people who might otherwise not get a chance to play, at least introduce them to the hobby, if not bring them in as full-time experienced game masters and players.
Awesome.
Shall we get to our news and commentary?
Yes.
We are going to do that then. We're going to start by saying that Dungeons and Dragons at PAX Unplugged 2023 starts Friday. And we got a preview of what Wizards of the Coast and their affiliates were going to be doing there. First, we heard that there will be a 50 years of D&D panel hosted by some WotC staff members. They will talk about what has been in D&D and what will be coming in D&D. So that will be interesting, and it's great that they have a full contingent of staffers there to do that.
And it's going to be streamed.
What else is happening? A D&D store. Okay, yes, you're absolutely right. It will be streamed.
So it's apparently going to be on the YouTube channel, which is kind of cool. So we will, unlike, we had all the, like, what exactly was it that they said, trying to recall when it came to the Game Hole panel. This year, it is going to be streamed so we can all find out and refer to the video.
You can catch it and link in the show notes.
Yeah, and you asked what else? The D&D store by Baldman Games. So all throughout whenever the hall is open, you can go to Hall C, booth 35A, and there you will find all kinds of products. The Planescape book will be there. There's an official Penny arcade pin of the Lady of Pain, and lots of other products there for sale. And of course, they're offering some games, Shawn.
They're offering quite a bit of games, actually. If you want to get your D&D on, especially your Planescape on, you can play, thanks to Baldman Games, Planescape Chapter 1. So the adventure that we have been reviewing and will be reviewing again soon. You can play Chapter 1 of Turn of Fortune's Wheel. There will also be a Planescape epic called Power in Pieces, written by Eric Mengi, and then some other schlub who shall remain nameless.
Yeah, I'm sure Eric will make up for whoever that idiot was.
Exactly. That will be a 4-hour event where you get to rollick and frolic and perhaps perish in the cage, sigil, the City of Doors. I don't want to spoil too much about it, but the DMs who are going to run it are reviewing copies of it as we speak, and I'm hearing some pretty fantastic things that will be accompanying this epic as well. So keep an eye out for that. If you're not into Planescape, you can also play Tomb of Horrors and the Hidden Shrine of Tamoachan. That will be run by Baldman Games. You can play your Adventures League characters, or you can use pre-gens that will be supplied by Baldman Games. And that is true for all of these adventures. But if you got your panel, you bought your stuff, you played your D&D, there's even more. What? Once you buy your books, Teos, what do you think can happen?
I mean, anything can happen, but maybe I could take my book to somebody famous and have them sign it. Is that possible, Shawn?
It's true. It is possible. Not only is it possible, it's possible from Jeremy Crawford, Mackenzie De Armas, Dan Dillon, Amanda Hammond, Chris Perkins, and James Wyatt. All of those folks will be at PAX Unplugged, signing books, talking with fans, giving their thoughts on this amazing job that they do. But that's not all. We also get this little hint. If you want more glimpses of the future of D&D, be on the lookout near the D&D play area. See you in Philadelphia. Ooh. We don't know what that means, although rumor has it that they may be showing off a virtual tabletop.
Ooh. Very cool. All right. We'll see what that is. I'm excited to see whether this virtual tabletop show off is actually something that we haven't seen before, if it's the exact same build as before. I'm very hopeful that it's got some indication of how it actually looks to play a game in the with revisions, right? With improvements.
We'll see. Yeah. Well, you know, Teos, not all of us got a chance to go to Wizards of the Coast headquarters to see it. Some of us, you know, just we have to wait for it to come to us.
I know, but even those folks who had to slum it and watch it on a video, I mean, you kind of got the full experience. But just saying, it's been a lot of months, and everybody who's touched it seems to have seen the exact same thing for all intents and purposes. So I'm ready to be amazed with changes.
Okay. We get a new digital release coming. It's called Heroes Feast, Saving the Children's Menu. This is a one-shot adventure, digital only, $5 on D&D Beyond. The adventure is for 10th level characters based on the third-party cookbook called Heroes Feast. A new Heroes Feast should be coming out soon. Tell us more about this, Teos.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a little surprising to me that it's based on a third-party product like that, though, you know, we looked at those sales numbers from the book scan data, and Heroes Feast was in the top 10 of all sales. So it's wildly popular, so maybe that's why. But I always think it's a little dangerous to play off of third parties, but they're doing it, and maybe it's good, maybe it's healthy. The adventure was written by actress and DM Deborah Ann Wall. We hear it was written some time ago, back when Kate Welch was on the D&D team, so thank you, Kate, for that. It may have even been part of a larger project that then became this. The adventure is roughly 7,200 words in length. It centers on locating missing magical ingredients to create the favorite dish of the town of Daggerford, so set in the Forgotten Realms. And you have to figure out why was the supply of ingredients disrupted and what's behind this. There is a video on YouTube interviewing Deborah Ann Wall. A D&D Beyond article talks about why higher level play is fun, since this is for level 10 characters. So it kind of talks you into that, which I thought was kind of a funny article to write, because 10th level is halfway. It's not really high level play, but you know, isn't that mid-level play? But I think maybe realistically for the way people play, it kind of is. So I'm not saying the articles are not appropriate. It caused me to look at it and go, oh yeah, wow, interesting. This is the third digital product in very rapid succession, and it's like, I don't know. I'm already kind of wanting them to slow down a bit, but we'll see. See what the cadence is.
That's right. So you can get those videos on D&D Beyond and also on YouTube. We also have news on the Deck of Many Things. We said before that it had to be postponed due to publication issues. And now we have a new date for it. The date was announced on D&D Beyond as January 5th for the Deck of Many Things physical release. And Teos notes in our show notes that's got to hurt for those holiday dollars that you sometimes depend upon.
Yeah, this is a premium product. It's clearly one of those, like, what's the big gift you want? Oh, I'd really love to have, this expensive Deck of Many Things with the deck inside and all this. And yeah, we'll see.
Just as we started recording, we come to find out that a new playtest packet for D&D 2024 has dropped just this morning.
I'm so excited. The Barbarian. Shawn. Wait, did you say Barbarian? Yeah. I'm so excited for this DMG content. Tell me, it's full of DMG content, yes. Right? Packed?
I believe that they may have not quite gotten that ready. So we are getting a revised version of the Barbarian, the Druid, and the Monk. Also new spells, revisions to existing spells and weapons, and a revised version of the ability score improvement feat. The glossary has also been updated to supersede the glossary from the previous playtest packets. We're not going to do an in-depth look at this, at least this week. We'll see when we get a chance to sit down and read it if there's anything worth talking about next time.
I couldn't help but look up when you said ability score improvement. So ability score improvement is now a feat you choose. So that whole, you don't have to use feats. Like, it's literally a feat is ability score improvement, where you increase one ability score of your choice by 2, or 2 ability scores of your choice by 1. Can't increase it above 20 until you're level 19. At that point, you can increase it to 22. But I find that really interesting that they've made it an actual feat now. So it's like, choose a feat or a feat, yeah. Shawn.
Yeah, well, it's the same thing. It's just moving what it is. Yeah. So I will wait until they release the version of the game, and then I will pass my judgment then. Who knows? We know from experience that they could put something in playtest packets that looks great or looks terrible, and then we never see it again, or we see something come into the game that was never playtested, or at least not playtested publicly that we saw. So
yeah,
you never know. Speaking of sequels, the D&D movie sequel has us interested.
Yeah,
maybe. You want to tell us about this?
I'm very interested, and I know who else is interested. Is Dave Clark, who blogged about this. But there was a story on Games Radar where they were interviewing Chris Pine about another movie that he's on, and they asked him, I guess the people interviewing were D&D fans, and they asked, hey, how about a potential sequel to the D&D movie? And Pine said, quote, I've heard some rumors about it, but I don't know anything yet, but I feel pretty confident that it may happen. When asked if he'd be happy to return, he said, absolutely. So that's a good sign. And Dave Clark on his blog talks about this and how the current movie has been very successful on Paramount Plus. More than anyone, Dave's been watching the rankings of the movie on Paramount Plus. It is top 5 on Paramount Plus worldwide and top 3 in the US right now. And it has been strong since release. It's only dipped out of the top 10 when Halloween had all, like, the Halloween movies were big, right? So it was all Halloween 1 through 10.
Right.
So it suggests a pretty decent long tail. And he points out that the movie lost money, but a relatively small amount at a time when big franchise movies were losing even more, right? So in the scheme of everything, it's probably in a pretty good place. Plus, there's no doubt we can look at, like, the book scan data jump and so on. The movie seemed to boost sales. There are 2 blips right around the announcement of the movie, the Super Bowl ad, and the release of the movie. So, this could all be really good for D&D to go into a sequel. So we'll see. It'd be super awesome.
There you go. Now to get into a little crowdfunding news, I wanted to remind everybody that the Seeker's Guide to Enchanting Emporiums is live right now on Kickstarter. What do you get? You get a sequel to the super high selling Seeker's Guide to Twisted Taverns. So, Twisted Taverns was taverns, amazing, fun, encounter filled taverns you could throw into your into your campaign. This one is the same, but with magic item shops or shops in general. You get at least 15 magic shops that are much more than what they seem. More than 6 memorable NPCs to interact with over and over again. They will become mainstays in your campaign with the shops that they oversee. Over 100 new magic items, NPCs, quests, adventure hooks, and encounters to inspire your game. Who contributed? Ginny D, maybe you've heard of her. James Hake, Logan Reese, also known as Runesmith, Ben Byrne, the host of the 1.5 most popular D&D podcast in all the realms, and many, many more. The Kickstarter is only about a week old. We're already over 300,000, and more stretch goals are dropping as we go. So check that out if you haven't already. Other crowdfunding news, Teos, what do you got?
Yeah, so it's got to be the shoes. Luke Gygax has launched a shoe company. I don't know if you expected that. If it's on your bingo card, pat yourself on the back. Luke Gygax has launched Gaxworks, a web store offering 2 designs so far for Converse-style shoes in a variety of styles like low top, high top, black or white rubber. And then you can choose either the Firewalker Red Dragon or the Elf and Eye Beholder with art by Errol Otis. Luke reminds us that Gary was once a shoe salesman, so I guess it runs in the family. $90 on up, which for shoes I'm told is reasonable, even though I'm absolutely cheap. But you can see it there, gaxworks.com/G20shoes, link in the show notes. Shawn, we also have a new Dark Sun fan supplement. Friend of the show, fellow Dark Sun superfan, Robert Aducci, reached out. He and creators have released Scale, Tail, and Claw, the reptilian people of Athos. Athos.org often has all kinds of Dark Sun content, so this is a free supplement under the fan policy with new reptilian options, all at athos.org.
And we also got news on Brian Sanderson's Stormlight RPG. And we got a glimpse of some of the designers and editors credited in this upcoming role-playing game. Friends of the show like Mario Ortegan and Anthony Rivera, editors like, and creators and editors like Sadie Lowery and Laura Herzbrunner have all worked on many 5e projects, including official Wizards of the Coast products, and now they are working on this. The Kickstarter will not launch until next year, but you can learn more about this game and the people who created it at polygon.com if you search under Stormlight RPG.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see how this takes off because Brian Sanderson had been working in the past with Crafty Games, and they made the Mistborn RPG. I believe Logan Bonner was the lead designer on that. It's been out for a long time, and sort of like the Song of Ice and Fire, it's been a quiet RPG, right? That has not been played like in any way commensurate with, say, the size of the book sales, right? And is that because Crafty Games is a smaller company? I don't know. But it'll be interesting to see whether this comes with some sort of a media push that is huge and explodes all over the place, right? But it's interesting with things like this, the Marvel RPG. You know, there's this potential. Can it be realized? So that's the thing that I'm most interested when it comes to this RPG. I have no doubt it'll be well designed, but does it somehow reach out and become huge?